How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital.
That's difficult to answer.
is the end. There's a noise inside my head of crying people facing death. Is this the end? Is this the end? Oh, I'm burning in the stone. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the stone. What have we done to the world? What have we done to the world? I'm burning in the stone. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the stone. This is the final I don't wanna get married. I don't wanna be just like you. Nobody bothered to ask me. They said I ought to be just like you. Well, I could get a marriage license for a husband and me, so I could use the health insurance for my HART. Since I can file taxi with the same gender spouse, I shouldn't feel so bad getting kicked out of my house. Don't send me a rainbow. Come on, 'cause never done shit for me. Don't wanna see at your table. A fucking invitation to your party. Wanna celebrate a game on your cable TV? Well, trans lesbians are calling southern bodies stuff to eat. You paid the world for CEOs to suck on some dick. Well, all the kids on the street are getting belted with whips. I don't wanna be equal, 'cause I know I'm fucking better than you. Your moderation is lethal. Get on my way, let me do what I need to. That's the protection that this nation still can offer to me. Just all it brings is do this is my gay bourgeoisie. So fuck off with your rainbow South American flag. The only colors that I need are the pink and the black.
All right. Welcome to Queer Marxism Month again. No, we're not doing Queer Marxism Month again, but there is a very specific reason that I played that song at the beginning for people who haven't seen it. Although I don't know what's going on. Where are the notifications? Where the heck is everyone? Like, I feel like this is a day that YouTube notifications didn't go out or something. Can everyone mount the like button for me so we can get some notifications to go out on the channel? Like, I swear to God. You never know. YouTube gave me a good couple weeks with being out of the shadow ban, and now I'm not. I can always tell when notifications don't go out on YouTube. I'll tell you that. Well, what can you do? Not much of anything. But the reason I played that song at the beginning is that we are going to be going back into a little portion of history today. See, they didn't go out. Some people bot didn't get a notification. Yep. YouTube notifications didn't go out. Very nice, YouTube. Very nice, YouTube. Fuck you, YouTube. What can you do? Well, whatever. Whoever, you know what? We leave it up to the universe. Whoever is meant to show up is going to show up. But I want to get a sense of who's in the chat right now. So press 1 in the chat if you know what the ACT UP movement is. Press 2 in the chat if you do not know what the ACT UP movement is. Because I know a lot of you know what the ACT UP movement is. We've talked about the ACT UP movement before, but we also do have new people here, and new people may not know what the ACT UP movement is, and that's totally okay if you don't. Okay, mostly ones, couple of twos. Awesome. Yep, the twos are the newer people. Of course, welcome newer people to the channel. So the reason that I played the Queer Marxism song at the beginning of the stream, for those of you who are here for it, is because the ACT UP movement is the precursor to the queer Marxists who wrote that song. So that song at the beginning of the stream, which is called Not Gay as in Happy, Queer as in Fuck You by the Dog Park Dissidents, that is a queer Marxist band. When they're talking about the pink and the black are queer Marxist colors. When they're talking about they don't want to get married, they don't want to be just like you, that is exactly what queer activists believe. That song was written in 2017. So not almost 8 years ago, something like that. However, 25 years before that song was written, there was something that happened that was pretty culturally significant in the country at the time. You may remember this if you are of a certain age. You may not remember it. And what happened about 25 years ago was the ACT UP movement. The ACT UP movement is the precursor for all the crazy shit we see on the radical queer far left today. If you want to know how their tactics evolved, it was the ACT UP movement. If you want to know why their colors are pink and black, it was the ACT UP movement. If you want to know why they do these militant direct actions where they're disturbing things and causing destabilization, it was the ACT UP movement. We can trace back basically every queer activist tactic and strategy and organizing skill and all that. Like literally it all comes back to the ACT UP movement. Even so significantly that this year at the Socialism Conference, one of the leaders of the ACT UP movement actually spoke this year at the Socialism Conference. And you're going to see they still talk about the ACT UP movement today. The ACT UP movement is very significant in the evolution of far left activism in the country. And so that's why we have to know about it. We have previously watched a documentary about the ACT UP movement. We watched it on Socialism Saturday, I think. It was called United in Anger. I'm pretty sure it's a great documentary. We might even rewatch it at some point for new people because it is actually a really, really great documentary. But there's all sorts of other videos out there about the ACT UP movement that I want to watch. And we're going to be watching a bunch of them today. So what was the ACT UP movement? The ACT UP movement was a movement in the 80s to demand that Ronald Reagan say the word AIDS. Because during the AIDS epidemic, Ronald Reagan, who was president at the time, just refused to say the word AIDS. And you might imagine this really pissed off the gay and queer community. And by the way, so for people who don't know, we have to do a little timeline of gay activism versus queer activism, because these are two separate things. And I understand why this is confusing to people, but really gay activists are much different than queer activists. But during the 80s, these two groups were almost completely aligned. There was a time in this country when gay activism and queer activism was virtually indistinguishable from each other. That time changed around the mid-2000s. So the splinter between gay activists and queer activists started in the mid-2000s. Ironically, right around the time Obama got elected, a little bit before that, but leading up to kind of like that whole thing. So in the 80s, so basically what happened is if you go back to the 60s and the 70s, it made sense. So queer, the term queer has been considered to be an anti-capitalist term since about the 60s. that's when I really started. I've done a lot of research into the timeline and the evolution of the term queer. And around the 1960s is when it first started showing up as an anti-capitalist term. Prior to that, it may have meant weird or something like that. But queer was defined as anti-capitalism round about the 60s. What's also going on in the 60s and the 70s is that you have this burgeoning gay rights movement that's starting on like the East and the West Coast, where basically there are a lot of gay people who just don't want to be shit on for being gay. All right. So you had militant queer activists who are anti-capitalists working a lot, and by the way, militant queer activists reject sexual norms. They reject categorization, they reject all those things. So it makes sense for them to align with the gay activists, because quite frankly, a lot of the militant queer activists do a lot of gay shit. They just do, but they're doing it for different reasons than the gay activists, and that's what I want you guys to see. The queer activists are doing it as a political statement. The gay activists are doing it because they're horny and they want to fuck. But they're all kind of doing the same type of stuff. So it makes sense in the 60s and the 70s and into the 80s for these two movements to be completely aligned with each other, because they kind of wanted the same thing. They wanted recognition. They wanted to be protected from discrimination. During the AIDS epidemic, they wanted, of course, money and funding to go towards creating a cure for AIDS or things like that, or even figuring out what it was at the time. So they were in complete political alignment through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, into the 90s. What happens in the 2000s is you start getting a push by the liberal gay rights activists to go after gay marriage and gays serving in the military, to be able to like normalize both of those things. Well, at that time, the militant queer activists, who are the real far left revolutionaries, the gay activists are not necessarily like left or right, by the way. The gay activists, I'm going to call them the liberal gay activists. The liberal gay activists, like, they're not politically radical. They're not anti-capitalist. They're not socialist. When we're talking about like the liberal gay activists, we're talking about people who didn't want to be fired from their jobs for being gay. We're talking about people who just wanted to be able to get married. We're talking about like your basic Democrat, like, can we just be nice to everyone? Can everyone just chill out and everyone be nice? And you don't fire someone for being gay, and you don't, if they want to live together, let them do what they want. It's like you had that kind of liberal sensibility, but then alongside that, in the queer activists, you had radical revolutionary socialists and militants. So when the liberal gay activists in the 2000s really started pushing all this money and all these resources into gay marriage and gays serving in the military, that really pissed off the queer activists, because the queer activists are anti-assimilationists. The queer activists are militantly anti-war. The queer activists don't want to be in the military, and the queer activists don't even want gay marriage to exist. And I know this might be confusing to people. I really do, because a lot of you have learned that gay and queer are the same thing, but they are not the same thing. And we've gone back many times on this channel into something I call the Counter-Revolutionary Book Club. You can find the Counter-Revolutionary Book Club over on the Substack. That is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. Go to the book club link. You can find a list of gender and queer documents that we're reading. These are all freely available on the internet. These are anarchist documents. Many of them are written around 2008, 2009, 2010. So you can find a list of those, links to those. You can find back episodes of the Counter-Revolutionary Book Club podcast, where we talk about these things. We are going to be getting back to doing the Counter-Revolutionary Book Club podcast for people who are missing out on that. But you can find the archives over on the Substack. The reason I bring that up, not that, this one. The reason I bring that up is we have read document after document after document from militant queer activists saying flat out, we don't want gay marriage. We don't want marriage to exist. We think marriage is normative. We think marriage is assimilationist. We don't like these liberal gay activists. The queer activists did not like the liberal gay activists in the mid-2000s. And what happened is they splintered. And then the liberal gay activists continued to fight for gay marriage, and they eventually won, and that was in 2015. What happened, do you think, to the gay rights establishment in 2015 when they won their big issue? They won the number one thing that they wanted, which was to be able to get married and have insurance and all that stuff. They won, okay? Remember, we have militant queer activists and we have gay activists. I don't remember which hand was which. The gay activists got what they wanted and they packed up and they went home. The gay activists were like, okay, we're done. We can get married now. And the normal, just like liberal gay activists stopped working in these organizations. So what happened? They created a void. And who came into that void but the militant queer activists? And that's when they co-opted all of the organizations, was after the legalization of gay marriage. So this timeline is very important. And I want people to understand this because this is one of the things I'm working on a book about right now. I'm working on a book about the development and evolution of queer Marxism because it is a fascinating topic. It is one of the number one things I cover. It's just so crazy and so dystopian, and it's all real. And you feel like when you're covering queer Marxism, you feel like you're in a real life version of the Hunger Games. You're like in the Capitol in the Hunger Games, surrounded by all these crazy people. But anyway, so it's really important people understand the evolution of this because, again, I know I've said this 80 times already, probably in this podcast. I understand why people think that gay and queer are the same thing because there was a time when they were. There was a time when they were so connected with each other and they were so aligned in their missions that they were the same thing at that time. But what I need people to understand is during the 2000s, they split off into two different things. The queer activists are all the crazy ones that we're dealing with in the world with the pink hair and the crazy tattoos, and they're doing the Boston Pride sex stuff and all this, all the crazy stuff. The gay activists mostly aren't, like the liberal gay activists mostly aren't doing this stuff anymore. Maybe they go to a protest and they hold a sign about trans kids or something like that. Maybe they, you know what? It's honestly probably the liberal gay activists who are Munchausen's by proxying their kids into believing they're trans. But you know what? That's a different problem. It's a different problem. The bigger problem we have to deal with are the queer activists. And if you want to know where the queer activists come from, it's the ACT UP movement. And you can see that because one of the most iconic things in the ACT UP movement is this silence equals death poster. It's so iconic that it is currently in the Brooklyn. The image is not available. What? Well, the silence equals death poster is currently in the Brooklyn Museum. This poster is in a literal museum. And you can see this was, and honestly, like, so I was at Boston Pride about a month ago. I saw people wearing this poster on a t-shirt today. They still talk about this today. You can see it's very, very simple. It's a pink triangle. They use the pink triangle because the pink triangle is what the gays had to wear during World War II. Now, in the meantime, since the ACT UP movement, the pink triangle's gotten turned upside down. So now for queer Marxism, it's an upside down pink triangle. You can see pink and black are the iconic colors that they use. That all came from this. You can see if we go back, not to that, to this, you can see you got Keith Haring, who's a famous artist that was doing this stuff look at this. This is in the Whitney Museum. Ignorance equals fear, silence equals death, pink triangle, fight AIDS, ACT UP. You can see there's iconic imagery. Silence equals death. Do you guys know where the term silence equals violence comes from? Do you guys know how leftists are like, if you don't speak up, your silence is literally violence? It came from the ACT UP movement and the silence equals death poster. So I want people to see, like, people think that woke stuff and leftist stuff just started under Obama for some reason. That's just when it started picking up steam. That's just when they started really destabilizing our society. I want people to understand this has been evolving in our world, literally right in front of us for a very, 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 very long time. Oh, let's see. We've got a troll. Let's see. As a member of ACT UP in San Francisco in the 80s, who is as anti-woke as Karlyn, I say you're having a James Lindsay moment. You've lost perspective. ACT UP was the right side of history, not a cult. Oh, yeah? Oh, yeah? Oh, yeah, Di Navarro? Oh, yeah? Hang on. Hey, Di Navarro, if ACT UP was on the right side of history, then why can I go to the Socialism Conference 2025 website? Hang on. Let me get your chat off the screen because it's very, very big. Let's see. Let me search the Socialism Conference 2025 schedule. ACT UP at the 2025 Socialism Conference. Lessons from ACT UP for today's solidarity movements. You're telling me this wasn't a leftist cult? Hang on, let's go over to the videos because we're going to watch a bunch of short videos today about the ACT UP movement. Let me just show you some of the videos here. Socialism Explained. This YouTube channel is called Socialism Explained. What was the ACT UP movement? This one right here, Inside Edition, How ACT UP Flipped the Script on AIDS and Gay Rights. That kind of sounds like what I just described. We've got the History channel covering ACT UP, Making Politics Simple. How was ACT UP organized? So we're going to find out that they're basically socialist organizers in watching this video. This is one of the people that still lectures about ACT UP to this day. Sarah Schulman, Jewish, obviously Jewish, Schulman. This is at Cognate Institute for the Humanities. They've got a lecture from her. They've got a lecture from her at Bard College. These are all extremely leftist institutions. She lectured at Hunter College. She lectured at Columbia University 13 years ago about the ACT UP movement. Oh, look, Veriso Books. That's a socialist book publisher. United in Anger. That is the documentary about the ACT UP movement. We watched that on the channel. You can go on and on. The ACLU a year ago did a historical retrospective on the ACT UP movement. This was not an insignificant thing. And as you can see, just based on the nature of some of these organizations, the New York City Democratic Socialists of America, this woman 3 years ago presented about the ACT UP movement to the NYCDSA. You're going to tell me this isn't a far left movement? You're going to tell me I'm wrong about it, D. Navarro? Okay. You're welcome to educate us in the chat about how much more you know about this than I do. So on the channel today, guys, we are going to watch some of these videos. Some of them are a lot shorter. I want to go through a bunch of the videos. Yeah, bro, listen, you haven't convinced me, Karlyn. The alphabet socialists have appropriated the entire movement going back to Stonewall. Bro, I don't think you're smart enough to be here. If you are, what you're going to do is you're going to shut your fucking mouth and you're going to listen. And moving forward, the rule for you in my chat is the only thing that you are allowed to do in my chat is to ask questions. That's it. If you do anything else other than to ask questions about the content that you're seeing, I'm going to ban you from the chat to prevent you from talking anymore. Because right now, you are not on the same level as us. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You're probably an internet troll trying to cause problems. And so we're going to make you prove yourself that you actually want to learn this information. And if you don't want to learn this information, we will simply remove you and we will never think about you again. And if you are the person we think you are, you can come back with your next internet sock account after that, because you have nothing else to do with your sad, pathetic life but watch every single stream I do. Anyway, so that's what we're going to be doing today, guys. We're going to be watching some stuff about the ACT UP movement. I got a couple quick things before we do that. First off, can we talk about this video real quick? It's only 38 seconds long, but I want to play it. Like, again, conservatives are just so taken aback by a topic on this channel that I have literally been covering for years. Hang on. I have literally been covering this for years. Apparently, I missed Racist Elmo over the weekend. Yeah, you did. Racist Elmo was pretty great. Elmo had to issue an apology. So conservatives have finally caught up to us again. I've been covering the Revolutionary Communists of America literally for at least 2 years on this channel. This is who they are. Let's play.
Do you think we need a revolution against the billionaires?
I do. How do we do that?
Excellent. Well, we're the Revolutionary Communists of America, and we're out here at Maria Hernandez Park. It's quite a lovely, lively day out here on a Sunday. And yeah, we're out here talking to workers, talking to students, bringing forward a revolutionary program. We're building a Marxist cadre organization. So that means that we're training Marxists that can train more Marxists so that we can build the core of the future mass party that can lead the working class to overthrow capitalism, expropriate the capitalists, put all of the means of production under democratic workers' control so that we can build for the needs of society and not just the profits of a parasitic layer of billionaires. Do you think we need a revolution?
And the conservative response is, you can't make this shit up. The Revolutionary Communists of America are actively recruiting an NYC for a Marxist cadre organization. Duh. First off, duh. I have literally been covering the Revolutionary Communists of America for at least 2 years. I literally have the Revolutionary Communists of America on video talking about overthrowing the federal government and raising the red flag of communism above the White House. Like, conservatives are so stupid and so far behind. The Revolutionary Communists of America have an organized presence in at least 30 U.S. cities. The Revolutionary Communists of America have probably at least tripled or quadrupled in size in the last couple of years that I've been covering them, because they recruit heavily on college campuses. If you see Karl Marx posters with Karl Marx pointing at you and it says, "Are you a communist?" It has a QR code. That's the Revolutionary Communists of America. When I was in Boston Pride last month, I saw Revolutionary Communists of America posters everywhere. They went on a stickering campaign. They put their posters and their stickers all over lamp posts and stuff like that. So wherever you looked around Boston Pride, you were seeing Revolutionary Communists of America. They also heavily recruit in the unions. They're going into the unions, like every leftist group in the known universe is, to recruit and radicalize people on the left to them. The Revolutionary Communists of America are Marxist-Leninists. They're actually one of probably the least dangerous groups of all the different communist groups. They do pretty much keep to themselves. They do show up at a lot of DSA stuff and protest stuff. They're the ones with the red t-shirts that you see. Like, you'll see these videos go viral on from conservatives every once in a while who don't know what the fuck they're talking about. But when you see these videos of all these communists in red shirts and they're waving red flags that are giant and have a hammer and sickle on it, that's the Revolutionary Communists of America. They are funded by dues and donations. So the Revolutionary Communists of America charge their members 1 day's wages per month to be a member in their organization. In exchange for their dues, they get newspapers to hand out, they get stickers to hand out, and stuff like that. And so you see a lot of them handing out their newspaper. You saw it on the stream, to different people in the street and stuff like that, because they're constantly recruiting and constantly trying to get more people to their organization. I actually had 2 leaders of the Revolutionary Communists of America come on the channel and talk with me. What was that? Probably a year and a half ago. They don't talk to me anymore because I got them to say the quiet part out loud more than once. And I've used that video all over the place. If you guys have ever seen the video that I have on Twitter where they're explaining what intifada means, I have them on video saying intifada means worldwide socialist revolution. So that was one of the first things that really was out there to say to conservatives, this has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, you retards. I had that on video 2 years ago. That was all the Revolutionary Communists of America. See? Children have to be banned. Goodbye. Go get your other troll account. So that's what that is. They are a real organization. They do have more numbers than people think. They tend to be pretty calm, honestly. They actually, one of the things I have to give the Revolutionary Communists of America props, because they will talk to you. They will talk to you about their ideas. They're not actually shy about their ideas at all. They tend to be very, very nice people. They're a little bit like Mormons. I kind of feel like I've never had a bad run-in with I've talked to a bunch of them. They've always been very polite to me. Even when I infiltrated their recruitment call and I recorded it, they may not have liked that too much, but they weren't actually mean to me after that. They still came and talked to me and stuff. And so I actually kind of appreciate the Revolutionary Communists of America. They don't have a lot of the queer bullshit, although I think they're going to get co-opted by queer at some point. But of all the communist groups, they put out a lot of content. We can watch it whenever we want. But they are an interesting group to follow. And I'm glad conservatives have finally caught up to where I was 2 years ago with this group. But, per usual, my audience is ahead of every other audience on the internet. That's okay. Someone has to be first. And I'm an Aries. And so that person will be me. All right. So that was thing number 1 I wanted to take a look at. Let's see. I got a couple other things I want to talk about before we get into the videos. As a reminder, I have a webinar coming up tomorrow because I'm going to be doing a live class called Re-Education and Anti-Communist Introduction to the Far Left. This is going to be a great opportunity for new people who are completely new to my work to learn, get kind of like a deep dive introduction to the language of the left. It's going to be about an hour and a half long. And basically what I want to do is I'm going to be recording it with a live group tomorrow, and you can come and see it live and ask questions and stuff like that. It's totally free. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on demand. If you're not available at the time tomorrow, it's going to be at 8 p.m. tomorrow. If you're not available for that time, but you want the on-demand video, just register for it anyway, and it'll send you the on-demand video as soon as the presentation is done, or a couple hours after it. It takes a little time to process sometimes, But I am doing this webinar for free because I want to put a class up on demand for new people. So definitely sign up. If you never took my How to Speak Socialist training, which is the 4-hour masterclass, definitely sign up. If you're still confused by socialist language, but maybe you don't want to ask questions because sometimes people don't like asking questions, definitely sign up. We're going to go through all the basics to give people just a really good kind of introduction. I will say an hour and a half is not enough time to teach you everything you need to know, but at least it's a start. And I'm going to try to do something to have a shorter than 4-hour masterclass introduction for this stuff, because that's one of the pieces of feedback I have. So you can find the link to that over on the Substack. I also just put it in the chat. It's Karlyn, Karlyn.substack.com. And if you appreciate the work I'm doing, please sign up to support it. $8 a month, $80 a year. You can also make a donation when you sign up for that webinar if you want to, but you don't have to. The webinar is totally free. And I just give people the option if they want to donate, they can, which of course I really, really appreciate. Let's see. Oh yeah, at 9 p.m. tonight, this is a little bit different. So I've been hanging out with men on the internet who like to argue that Jesus is a Jewish psyop. Now, this is no offense to Christians. I don't care if you're a Christian. You can believe whatever you want, but I like to hang out with men who don't like Christianity and who argue that it's a Jewish religion, and they have reasons for that. And I'm going to be talking to one of those men. His name is Amalek. And we're going to be talking at 9 p.m. tonight on a Twitter space. And basically, I'm going to ask him how he became a racist and an anti-Christian, anti-Abrahamic, activist, I guess I would call him. And I think it's going to be really interesting. Listen, if you don't agree with any of this, that's fine. You don't have to agree with these points, but I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation. He's a really nice guy. We've been chatting a bunch, and I think his story is interesting, and I think his perspective is interesting. He's really well-spoken. So that Twitter space is going to be tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And then we're going to do that. Can I do a maze on Friday? Trendlin wants to know if I can do a maze on Friday. Well, Trendlin, here's the thing, Trendlin. I think we need to do Tucker on Friday. I'm sorry, Trendlin. I think we need to do Tucker on Friday because Tucker is interviewing Daryl Cooper, and this is going to be an epic internet shit show meltdown. And you all know that I don't know maybe we should do a maze for 420. That's actually Trendlin, are you available tomorrow? Maybe we should just do a maze for 420. That might actually not be the worst idea in the world. Anyway, Tucker Carlson is interviewing Daryl Cooper. It's going to be a massive shit show, and it's going to be so funny, and they're going to be melting down about it all over the internet. And so we're probably going to watch that on Friday. But maybe we can do a maze tomorrow if Trendlin is available. Let's see. Is there anything else that I needed to talk about? I don't think so. All right, that's it. Let's get into our videos, shall we? And we're just going to watch some short videos to start, honestly. And I kind of just want to see I want to see what was like the general coverage of ACT UP at that time. And I also want to see socialists and other people explaining what the ACT UP movement is. As a reminder, guys, this is a research group on some of my streams. So I am doing research right now. I'm researching because I'm writing a book about this, and I want to learn more about the different coverage of this movement at the time, both mainstream coverage and more far leftist coverage. So we're just going to, go through some videos. We're going to watch them. We're going to talk about them. And some might be shorter, some might be longer. If you have ideas about any of this, please feel free to put them in the chat. I am watching the chat on Rumble and on YouTube and on Kick and on Twitter, so I can see all your chats. Sadly, Rumble doesn't show up in the chat on the screen because it's not integrated with StreamYard. It's not my fault. Nothing I can do about it, but everyone else's does, and I am keeping an eye on the Rumble chat in a separate window. Where do you sign up for the seminar? I will put in the chat again. There you go. So let's just jump right in and let's look at this Inside Edition coverage. Come on, load.
This beautiful day started with trouble in Lower Manhattan. More than 100 protests. Demonstrators were demanding more money in the war against AIDS.
Hang on. It's still spinning on my end for some reason. Why are you still spinning? There's no reason for this, YouTube. There's no reason. There's no reason. Oh, do I do something wrong with the sizing? Maybe that was it. Why the fuck are you still spinning, YouTube? No reason for this.
In the spring of
Here we go.
1987, an upstart activist group started making noise and changes to help people with HIV.
Oh, come on. Seriously? Hang on. We're going back to the beginning. Are you serious, YouTube? Are you fucking serious? Look at that hair, man. The 80s were something else. Okay, we're good.
This beautiful day started with trouble in lower Manhattan. More than 100 people were arrested during a protest. Demonstrators were demanding more money in the war against AIDS.
In the spring of 1987, an upstart activist group started making noise.
Yeah, this is a great point.
And changes to help people with HIV.
This is actually a really great point. When you guys think of like AIDS activism in the 80s, think pro-Palestinian activists now. And quite frankly, a lot of the pro-Palestinian activists now were inspired by the ACT UP movement in the 80s. And I bet you we can find that lady talking about Palestine today. The one that lectures on the ACT UP movement.
AIDS.
Well, ACT UP was the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. It was a direct action political activist group that started in March 1987. My name is Sarah Schulman, and I'm the author of Let the Record Show, a political history of ACT UP New York, 1987 to 1993.
Schulman, a journalist and former ACT UP member, says the group accomplished a lot in a short period of time at the height of the AIDS crisis.
In 6 years, ACT UP achieved incredible victories for people with AIDS. Some of the most outstanding wins were that ACT UP forced pharmaceutical companies and the government to change the way they researched medications for AIDS. ACT UP forced the Food and Drug Administration to make experimental drugs available to people who were sick, even if they had not been approved. ACT UP made needle exchange legal in New York City, which meant that people who were using needles for intravenous drug use could exchange them for clean needles so that they could avoid transmitting HIV through blood contact. ACT UP stopped the Catholic Church when they tried to interfere with condom distribution in the public schools. ACT UP ran a 4-year campaign to make sure that women with AIDS could get benefits and get access to experimental drugs. And really, ACT UP transformed how queer people and people with AIDS felt about themselves and how we were represented in the mainstream media.
Healthcare is the right! Healthcare is the right!
ACT UP's public protests could make the group difficult to ignore.
So ACT UP was a very bold and daring organization because people were fighting for their lives. So at one point, the Catholic Church in New York City was fighting public schools who wanted to make condoms available to students to save their lives. And ACT UP thought, this is a state of emergency. We can't just sit back and let the church do this, and it could cause people's deaths. So they made the very bold move of, in December 1989, disrupting Mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral, demanding that the church stop hurting people, not only queer people, but anyone who was trying to protect themselves from HIV.
Schulman says the controversial protest at St. Patrick's marked a shift in the way the LGBTQ community stood up for itself.
It was considered a real changing moment in gay politics and in queer power, because it was really the first time that people with AIDS stood up to such a fixed, large source of power in New York City as the Catholic Church.
Treatment for HIV/AIDS has improved dramatically since the 90s. But because HIV/AIDS still exists, ACT UP still exists to advocate for healthcare reform and research.
Hang on. Oh, come on. Look at that sign. Look at that sign. Holy shit. AIDS isn't over for anybody until it's over for everybody. Where have we heard something that sounds freakishly familiar to that? Where have we heard something before that sounds freakishly familiar to that sign. AIDS isn't over for anybody until it's over for everybody. No one is free until everyone is free. No one is free until everyone is free. No one is free until everyone is free. What the left means when they say no one is free until everyone is free is no one is free until everyone is liberated from capitalism. Everyone is oppressed by capitalism, and therefore no one is free until everyone is liberated from capitalism. Wow. See, this is why we go back and watch this old stuff, because it's like if you live through this time period, you probably have a different perspective of it. But like when you go back and you watch it with the greater context that we have now, where we can see what the far left is saying now, we can see what ideas they're pushing now, we can see what colors they're wearing now, we can see what symbology they're using, we can see what lines they're using, we can hear what chants they're chanting. You can see the very clear line of how it evolved and how it became what it is today.
ACT UP still exists to advocate for healthcare reform and research, as well as for the rights of people with HIV/AIDS. And the early years of ACT UP may serve as a template to other activist groups.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the most important takeaway
Queers
is
for
to be focused
look at
on
this.
concrete goals.
Queers for Black lives. Queers for Black lives. Wow. What did these other things say? White, black, silence equals death. I can't read this sign. Queer liberation. I want to know what that sign says. Queer liberation what?
So that you are the expert to design the solution that's reasonable, winnable, and doable, to present it to the powers that be, and if they refuse, to do creative, nonviolent...
Hang on. So I know that you're new, and I appreciate that you signed up for my class, but what you need to know is that your definition of capitalism doesn't mean anything. Your definition of capitalism is not the far left's definition of capitalism, and we don't do this thing where we talk about whether capitalism is good or bad on this channel, because the only thing that matters is the far left wants to abolish all private property ownership. Their definition of capitalism is private property ownership. They consider capitalism to be an economic model and a cultural model, and so the only thing we care about is that capitalism protects private property ownership, which means your ability to own a home, land, intellectual property, apartment rental, business that you rent out as a landlord. It also means your parental rights over your children, because those are the things that the left is trying to abolish. So your definition of capitalism has literally fuck off nothing to do with what the left is talking about. It has nothing to do with how they think of capitalism. You cannot have a reasonable conversation with them on this. There are many other places on the internet you can go and talk about this. I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but on this channel, all we care about is that the left defines capitalism as private property ownership. Your definition is not the same, and so we don't conflate the two, because it's confusing for everyone. So I hope that helps. No, the WEF and the UN is a completely separate thing. It's a separate problem. A problem, but a separate problem.
So that you can communicate to the public through the media and pressure institutions to change.
This is Inside Edition Digital.
All right. Back to the search results. What was the ACT UP movement? From Socialism Explained.
What was the ACT movement? Have you ever wondered how grassroots activism can change the world? The ACT UP movement, which stands for the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, is a powerful example of this. Formed in the late 1980s, ACT UP emerged from the urgent need to address the AIDS crisis. People living with AIDS faced not only a deadly illness but also neglect from the government and society. This desperation drove them to organize and demand immediate action to save lives. ACT UP is known for its direct action tactics. Members engaged in street protests, media disruptions, and civil disobedience. These actions aim to...
Just want to pause there. ACT UP was known for its direct action tactics. Who do we know that uses direct action today? Oh, militant queer activists and Antifa, including street protests and civil disobedience. I know this might seem weird, but there was a time when the types of disturbances that we see at protests wasn't as commonplace as it was now. And so if you go back and you look, what ACT UP did is ACT UP would have die-ins in churches where they would all just lay there in the church holding their signs and their graveyard like cardboards or whatever. They would do these huge things designed to basically cause disruption and draw attention to something. And so they were one of the pioneering groups of that type of protesting activity.
Front issues like homophobia, racism, and misogyny, which contributed to the inadequate response to the AIDS epidemic. The movement operated through a decentralized structure, with various committees focusing on specific issues
That's a
such as treatment
socialist
access,
method of organizing,
housing, and outreach. One of the unique aspects of ACT UP was its use of affinity groups.
They do that today.
Smaller, issue-focused collectives allowed members to engage in targeted activism and support one another. This structure enabled ACT UP to mobilize thousands of people and sustain a broad campaign against the AIDS crisis. From a socialist perspective, ACT UP challenged capitalist systems that prioritized profit over public health.
Oh yeah? Oh yeah? ACT UP challenged capitalist systems that prioritize profit over public health? Oh yeah? You don't say.
Movement highlighted how pharmaceutical companies and government agencies often delayed access to life-saving treatments due to economic interests. ACT UP's activism exposed the intersection of health, class, race, and sexuality, showing how marginalized communities were disproportionately affected. ACT UP also drew inspiration from feminist and disability activism. It incorporated lessons from struggles for reproductive rights and healthcare access. This intersectional approach built solidarity among diverse groups, including gay men, lesbians, women, and people of color. They united in the fight against oppression and for dignity and care. Practically, ACT UP achieved significant victories. The movement accelerated drug approval processes and expanded access to experimental treatments. It also promoted harm reduction programs like needle exchanges. These efforts demonstrated the power of organized, grassroots direct action to force change, especially in the face of institutional inertia. The ACT UP movement is a powerful example of activist organizing rooted in the urgent need for social justice and healthcare equity. Through coalition building, direct action, and challenges to capitalist healthcare structures, ACT UP embodied key socialist principles. Its fight to end the AIDS crisis and secure rights for marginalized communities remains a vital part of activism today.
So ACT UP was a key socialist movement. Okay, got it. Thank you, Socialism Explained, for that. Let's watch it. So one of the things that I think is so interesting about that Inside Edition coverage, and I think we're going to find the same thing with like the History Channel coverage, is like pay attention when we're going through these clips about how the mainstream media covers this, because what they do is they position it like this is a noble protest for fairness and equality for everyone, and we are fighting for justice in the world against the evil empire and stuff like that. And so they're painting this like this is propaganda, I guess is what I'm trying to say. This is propaganda to say, don't you want to be involved in the glorious fight for social justice and equality? I bet that's what this is going to do. Let's see.
Dr. King once said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice."
Oh, come on. No. Come on, YouTube. Come on. Get it together, YouTube. Oh, why is it doing this? Why is it doing this? Okay, let's give it a second. Let's just give YouTube a second. It's thinking about it. It's considering showing us the video. In the meantime, please mount the like button, guys. If you're new to the channel, please make sure you're subscribed. I stream Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, let's see.
Dr. King once said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." I cannot call myself a champion of civil rights unless I champion everyone's civil rights. Growing up, I had very limited exposure to the
Kareem
gay community,
Abdul-Jabbar,
didn't
no!
understand it.
No!
One thing that was very instrumental in me having more compassion and trying to understand what's going on beyond my experience had to do with the murder of Matthew Shepard in 1998. You know, he was tortured and left to die out in the freezing cold. Why? Because he was gay? It's the same as what happened with Emmett Till. Hatred and bigotry leading to murder. It's the first time I understood it in terms of being just as bad as what I had experienced as a Black American, and just as unjust. The end of the 60s sees the first rise of the gay rights movement.
See, 60s gay rights movement,
At
queers
this time,
doing the same thing.
homosexuality is still outlawed in 49 states, and the LGBTQ plus community is subjected to constant discrimination and harassment. But things change on June 28, 1969.
Stonewall.
After police raid the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in New York City, an uprising ensues in the streets as angry patrons fight back, injuring several policemen. While the scene gets scant attention in the media, this one incident lights a fuse, and a revolution takes flight.
Stonewall was a key turning point that led to an explosion in the growth of what came to be known as the gay liberation movement and the gay civil rights movement.
Okay, so
a decade later, in 1979,
hang on. This is an important distinction. So what he said was we had the gay liberation movement and we had the gay civil rights movement. Those weren't the same thing. The liberation movement is the anti-capitalist movement. The gay rights movement is we just want to be able to be treated fairly. Do you guys see the distinction? Anytime you're hearing the term liberation, liberation means to liberate oneself from the oppressive system of capitalism. So what they're calling the gay liberation was really the queer liberation movement. And then you had the LGBT rights movement, and they were both working together side by side because at that time they had the same goals. They didn't start having different goals until the 2000s.
The first ever national march on Washington for gay and lesbian rights draws around 100,000 people to lobby for new civil rights legislation. But soon the movement faces a much more dangerous threat.
Acquired immune deficiency syndrome, or AIDS for short, was first identified about 18 months ago.
In the 1980s, the gay community is staring down a death sentence as the AIDS crisis rages.
I think people got effects. Because that's what it's all about. If I knew all the facts, maybe I wouldn't be here.
Many feel the Reagan administration's response is neither rational nor robust.
Ronald Reagan was probably the worst person to be in office in the midst of an epidemic. He couldn't even say the word AIDS.
Amidst all this death and disregard, a playwright and activist named Larry Kramer decides he cannot stand by in silence.
What he saw was the government neglecting all of these people who are dying and doing nothing. Where are the drugs? Where is the testing?
I myself have lost now 18 friends who have died, and it's like wartime when you have those kind of statistics that affect you personally.
Kramer and a group of activists launch ACT UP, the AIDS coalition to unleash the power.
We will not rest in peace is what that sign says, right? We will not rest in peace. Let's go back to a better view of it. Hang on 1 second. I have a point to make.
Kramer and a group of activists launch ACT UP, the AIDS coalition to unleash the power, to demand research.
So the acronym for ACT UP was the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. They had a sign that said, "We will not rest in peace," with ACT UP right under it, AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. What do leftists say when someone dies? Does anyone know the answer to this? When a leftist activist dies, what do they say? We haven't talked about this in a long time, so people might not know this, but this is true. Rest in power. Yes. When a leftist activist dies, they don't say rest in peace. They say rest in power. We will not rest in peace. AIDS coalition to something like unleash power. Do you guys think that's a coincidence? Every one of these ideas comes from somewhere.
And funding. The group's in-your-face protest tactics go well beyond marches and chants.
Release the drugs now!
Dozens of demonstrators, many of them suffering from the deadly AIDS virus, were arrested during the protest by police, many of whom wore protective plastic
Black
gloves.
Panthers did that too, you're right.
ACT UP was really crucial in getting attention in important places.
They did die-ins. They took the protests to the FDA.
You know what I want to do? You know what I want to do? Can we add this to the list of 87 projects that I perpetually have all the time? Do you guys remember? So last night we watched some videos about animism, which is like the first religion. And one of the videos that we watched had this really fantastic chart that I want to do a larger video on, basically about how all the different religions evolved, and it was like the tree of the religion. So it starts with animism at the bottom, and then all of these other religions pop up out of that. And what I'm kind of thinking about in my head right now is, wouldn't it be cool if we could make some infographic that describes like the evolution of leftist groups and actually shows like the Frankfurt School at Columbia led to this and this, and ACT UP out of what came out of this, and this came out of that, and this came out of that other thing. That would actually be really cool.
To the White House, to Wall Street.
Healthcare is a right! Healthcare is a right!
In October 1987, ACT UP joins other gay rights groups in a second national march on Washington.
Bigots gotta go! Bigots! Bigots! Bigots gotta go!
By the early 90s, HIV and AIDS diagnoses reached the hundreds of thousands. But the stereotype that the virus only affects the gay community persists. In 1991, many of our eyes were opened up when a dear friend of mine steps up to the mic.
Because of the
Magic Johnson, no!
HIV virus that I have attained, I will have to retire from the Lakers today.
When I heard that Magic had come down with HIV, I was there when he announced it. Nobody knew what he was going to say.
You know, sometimes you're a little naive about it and you think it could never happen to you. You only thought it could happen to, other people and so on and on. And it has happened, but I'm going to deal with it.
He made people acknowledge the fact that anybody could get it. And, it helped in its own way. It helped turn public opinion around. Today, the government spends billions on AIDS and HIV research. That can be directly attributed to the work of activists like Larry Kramer of ACT UP and the Great March.
If we follow the templates of our ancestors and the legacies they've left, our democracy isn't perfected until we go out into the streets to make sure it lives up to its creed.
Oh, yeah? Democracy isn't perfected until we protest?
Thank goodness for protest.
Thank goodness for protest.
Thank goodness that people had the good sense to holler like hell.
Thank goodness for
protest,
protest, guys.
Rights were violated.
Protest to me personally means trying to eliminate something that is unbearable. It requires that you go and protest and confront whatever the issue is, whoever the people are, whatever the institution is. The hopeful result of them will be
changed. The noble protesters, guys. Isn't this amazing? Don't you all want to be a part of the leftist protest? You're a hero. You're basically a hero if you are a leftist protester. Listen, and I want to say too, I actually do think that the ACT UP campaign had some legitimate grievances, but that's how it always is on the left. Is it starts off with okay, yeah, you may have legitimate criticisms of capitalism. We can have a conversation about that. There are legitimate criticisms to be made of capitalism. However, I don't think the solution to those legitimate grievances are, let's abolish all private property, including parental rights, and live on communes. I don't think that's a good idea either. The left had legitimate grievances with how gay people were treated in this country. They had legitimate grievances where there were a lot of people dying. And listen, you could say it's their own damn fault because they had sex in a bathhouse, and you might have a point there, but there were still a lot of people dying, and it was a new thing, and they didn't know what to do, and they didn't feel like their voices were being heard. You can look at that and say, okay, they kind of had a legitimate grievance there, but then you have to understand that their solutions for those grievances are always and forever communism. Always. The end goal of every single leftist protest ever is communism. And that is always what the organizers want. And so there may be people there that are like, we just want to be able to get married, bro. Yeah, okay, that might be a legitimate grievance. Some people agree, some people disagree. I don't really care either way, quite frankly. But the larger movement was never about gay marriage. In fact, there were a lot of people in the queer activism movement that never wanted gay marriage in the first place. So it's about really understanding, like, why are they doing this? Like, what, like, it's not about, like, fighting for people to be treated fairly is a good and noble thing. But the reason the History Channel is presenting it that way is not because, oh my God, look at these noble protesters. It's to propagandize, to make people want to be part of the far left. That's all this is. And it's so disappointing. It sucks. I can't even watch TV anymore. This is why I can't watch TV. I watch the History Channel now, and I'm like, oh, wow, this is just all raging leftist propaganda. This is all communist propaganda, sometimes Jewish propaganda, who knows. Anyway, let's move on. This is a PBS documentary, How Activists Changed American Healthcare. This is about 12 minutes long. Come on, YouTube, come on. I'm clicking YouTube. I don't know why this audio thing is following me around, but
our continued existence depends on just how angry you can get. That's how writer Larry Kramer started his essay, 1112 and Counting, a landmark text that helped ignite the movement to end the AIDS epidemic. And that number in the title, that was the number of people living with serious cases
we
of
should
AIDS
do
in the
this.
United
it's on the
States
list.
At the time.
You're right.
March,
I have it. I have the
1983,
original.
Kramer was panicked, but he was also pissed. Nearly 1,000 people had already died from the disease, many of them gay men. And Kramer believed that bureaucratic negligence was slowing the search for a cure. In his essay, Kramer called out pretty much everyone with any connection to the American healthcare system for letting the AIDS crisis turn into an epidemic. And his list was specific, by the way. It included officials at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, officials at the Food and Drug Administration, researchers at the National Institutes of Health, doctors at the Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, all of the insurance companies, and he even name-checked local policymakers too. Kramer's public letter was an early example of the kind of resistance that AIDS activists would take in the late 80s and early 90s, and would prove to be successful. It was a form of resistance that they'd later call inside-outside strategy. It started with researching what policies needed to be improved inside walled-off government agencies and drug companies.
We just heard the DSA talk about this inside-outside strategy. So for people who missed the spy stream we did the other day, by the way, the spy stream we did the other day, you can find the archive of it over on the Substack. We went inside an NYC DSA organizing meeting, and it was a private meeting. Like, you had to be a member of the DSA to get into it. And, someone gave me a link. I'm not going to say how I got into it, but I'm just going to say someone that's a member of the DSA in New York City gave me a link. And so we got into it. And so I got to see all of their private data. But just so people are aware, Zoran Mandami, the DSA candidate for mayor in New York, is 1,000% going to win, and it's not even going to be close. He is going to slaughter them. That spy stream was crazy. But the bigger point I want to make is they actually did a whole section in the spy stream about how the Democratic Socialists of America today in New York City are organizing around an inside-outside strategy, which is the inside strategy is what can we do to get Zoran elected to office and what changes can we make inside the system. But the outside strategy is what is the ongoing protest and leftist activism that we're going to do separately, like in the streets, protesting and disturbances and stuff like that. What are we going to do outside the political system to make sure we're continuing to push everything as far left as we can go? That's what the inside-outside strategy is, and it was literally just mentioned in a PBS documentary. That's from the far left. The inside-outside strategy is from the far left. That's fucking crazy.
of resistance that they'd later call inside-outside strategy. It started with researching what policies needed to be improved inside walled-off government agencies and drug companies. And then
it's not really revolutionaries and reformers working together so much as it's, you got to remember the DSA, even though the DSA are reformers, the DSA still does want a post-capitalist society. And I think the DSA is very aware that working inside the government is not the only thing that's going to get them their post-capitalist society. So it's not that reformers don't engage in protest and direct action. They do. Of course they do. But I think that the difference between reformers and revolutionaries is not like both groups engage in direct action, both groups engage in protest, but revolutionaries just don't believe in spending time or resources or money on elections.
Then moved to the streets, finding creative ways to build momentum for their movement outside of bureaucracy. Their methods of resistance didn't just benefit people living with HIV and AIDS. It ended up changing the way the government researches important new drugs and how people access certain treatments even today. I'm Felicia for the win, and this is Roots of Resistance.
No, the banking cartels have nothing to do with this, Upgrade.
In the early 1980s, movie lovers were just getting to know Indiana Jones. Everyone seemed to be obsessed with aerobics, and HIV and AIDS were still shrouded in mystery. In fact, while the AIDS disease was given its name in 1982, researchers had yet to uncover the actual virus behind it. In those early days, information about the virus and the fatal illnesses it caused was still evolving.
There's holy shit!
Among gay men in Los
Was
Angeles
that
suggested
hang
that
on, was that literally Anthony Fauci? Is that Fauci? Like literally? Wow! Literally, when was this? When was this? This is old. Hang on. When was this? Oh, this was only uploaded a year ago. Okay, so it's actually not that old. That's funny. Wow.
Evolving. But after a group of cases among gay men in Los Angeles suggested that the disease could be sexually transmitted, a dangerous and false narrative took hold. Misinformation spread that the mysterious new illness was a gay disease, even though there were cases of the same infections in straight people.
Oh, yeah.
And people with a lot of visibility, like nationally recognized newscasters and politicians, repeated that misconception. And yet, for the first 6 years of the crisis, Ronald Reagan, who was the president at the time, didn't speak publicly about it at all.
And so it was clear that there was an anti-gay backlash already going on before the advent of AIDS in 1981. As young gay people, we were all very aware of the news stories about it, but there was a huge mystery about what was AIDS, how was it transmitted, was it a virus, were there sexual practices or other practices that could protect you or protect others. By the time I moved to New York in '86, it really was clear the federal government was not committed to making a response.
Hang on. I'm going to answer this question, but Upgrade, I'm going to encourage you. Listen, I know you're new to this and I know you have a lot of questions and we want to encourage those questions. Do me a favor, make a list of those questions and ask them in the webinar on Tuesday night, on Thursday night, unless it directly relates to this, just because you're asking a lot of really great questions, but I don't want to stop the video like every 5 seconds to answer questions, okay? Especially if it's not related to this, but I will answer your questions, I promise. Who is the head of the snake? You have to understand, the left does not think like the right. The right thinks in terms of hierarchy. There's a person in charge and there are many people under that person in charge. The left does not think in hierarchy. The left thinks in terms of equity. Everyone is at the same level. The left does not have a hierarchical structure where funding comes from the top and then it goes down like and trickles down. That's not how they work. And conservative media doesn't understand this, and conservative influencers lie about this all the time. There is no one leader on the left. There is no one funding source on the left. Most of the left is self-funded through through mutual aid, donations, dues, things like that. The way that any organization is funded, like people pay money and you get a thing, that's what it is. And so It's a collectivized structure that is highly decentralized where there is no leadership, but they coordinate and communicate with each other in a decentralized manner. That way, you can't just get one funder. This is why it's stupid for the right to obsess about funding. By the way, Soros does not fund most of this stuff. This stuff is not mostly funded by the CCP. Every once in a while, you might find an exception to that, but it is an exception, is not the rule. Most of what the left does is completely funded based on their dues, donations, mutual aid, stuff like that. So you're going to learn a lot in the webinar on Thursday, and I definitely want to encourage you to ask questions, but we also want to make sure that you're actually paying attention to what's going on, because you're going to learn more if you're paying more attention to the video than you are to the chat.
Even whatever response they were doing wasn't meeting our needs and was creating a research infrastructure that wasn't accessible to people that were living with AIDS.
By 1987, the U.S. death toll from AIDS had risen to 40,000. And worldwide, HIV infections were in the millions. In New York City, where the number of cases and deaths were climbing, large groups of people who were grieving their friends and concerned for their own health, started assembling at the Lesbian and Gay Community Services Center, hoping to find information that could lead to better treatment and a cure.
Oh no, that was
On
way
March
before. That was
10th,
after. Never mind. Don't mind me.
Larry Kramer was
So used to
invited
them
to the
talking about
center to
Stonewall.
speak. During his talk, he asked one side of the audience to stand up. Then he turned to them and said, "At the rate we're going, you could be dead in less than 5 years." Well, that made an impact. 2 days later, about 300 people came back to the center. Many of them were members from smaller, disparate activist projects, and together they formed the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, or ACT UP for short.
So what did we just say? So I just told Upgrade that the left is highly decentralized, where you basically have a lot of small groups or cells, and then occasionally many of those cells come together and they decide to work together on something. This is why when you go to leftist protest websites, you'll see lists of like dozens and dozens and dozens of organizations that are sponsoring and supporting leftist protests, because there are all these different organizations, and then they say, okay, how can we work together? And they come together and they form an alliance. What the video just said is the ACT UP movement was comprised of a lot of smaller organizations that were all working separately from each other that then came together to form the coalition. ACT UP is a coalition. So listen again.
Came back to the center. Many of them were members from smaller, disparate activist projects, and together they formed the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, or ACT UP for short. ACT UP brought together a diverse group of activists, people with lived and organizing experience in not only the queer community, but also in the feminist, racial justice, and criminal justice reform movements as well. Some people joined who had no history of organizing at all. And it was this intersectional understanding of who was affected by HIV/AIDS and how that brought tremendous depth to the way that the group worked.
I represent the excluded and underrepresented groups of women, minorities, and HIV-positive individuals, and also prisoners, of which I am a member of all of the above. It is important to us that we educate ourselves, that we learn what treatments are available and how effective they are, and that we be given unlimited access to them.
ACT UP's inside-outside strategy paired in-your-face attention-grabbing protests with deeply researched policy recommendations. ACT UP members delivered their findings directly to employees within the government agencies, and then held them accountable through demonstrations outside the building gates. Instead of marches on Washington, D.C., ACT UP favored less conventional but still high-profile locations for protests and demonstrations, places that had specific relevance to their message. In 1987, ACT UP descended on Wall Street to protest the obscene price tag on AZT, which was the only medication approved to treat AIDS at the time. In the 80s, AZT cost $10,000 a year. Accounting for inflation, that'd be about $27,500 a year today. Then they disrupted Mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral to protest its opposition to life-saving safe sex education and condoms. They also waged a multi-year campaign in the early 90s, urging the CDC to expand the definition of AIDS because it didn't include symptoms and illnesses experienced by women. Without an official diagnosis, women with AIDS were unable to receive the same government benefits and care that men with AIDS could. When ACT UP requested to meet with the FDA, they were initially rebuffed. And that's when they decided to take their message outside. On October 11, 1988, ACT UP staged a massive demonstration outside the FDA's headquarters in Rockville, Maryland. The protest brought together more than 1,000 activists from across the country, all fired up to disrupt the FDA's workday and make their demands known. In order to put a stop to the AIDS crisis, they wanted the FDA to get more drugs into trials, to speed up their unnecessarily slow approval process, to stop the unethical use of placebos, and to broaden access to treatments by making HIV drugs more affordable and trials more inclusive.
My name is Vito Russo, and I have AIDS, and I'm here today because I don't want to die. I know that there are drugs out there that can save my life. We are simply asking the FDA to do it quicker.
You know, we got up before dawn. We took the subway to the FDA headquarters, which is this massive bureaucratic-looking office building in suburban DC. And somebody put some ACT UP stickers on the walls of the subway and became the very first person to be arrested. Then later in the day, over 100 people were arrested, either trying to get into the FDA building or doing something else that pissed off the Montgomery County Police that were all decked out in gloves. They were informed wrongly that you could get HIV by handling somebody with your hands.
ACT UP made the AIDS crisis national news for the very first time. Their demonstration was on the front page of papers in Boston, Baltimore, Dallas, Houston, Orlando, and Miami. And the FDA took ACT UP's call the very next day. And when other government offices wouldn't meet with them, they took it outside in organized protests at the CDC, at the New York Stock Exchange in 1989, and the NIH building in 1990.
The thing that I want to point out is that that process doesn't work. That process of having meetings with people in government doesn't work unless we can mobilize thousands of people like we are tomorrow at the NIH. We have to break down the cult of the expert in every area of the society. The people with AIDS are the experts in this disease.
Yo! We have to break down the cult of the expert in our society. The people with AIDS are the experts in this disease. Where have we heard language like that before? We have to break down the cult of the expert in society. The people with AIDS this is about the lived experience. This is about the people with the lived experience. And breaking down the cult of the expert, by the way, is also, it goes back to like pedagogy of the oppressed, because the experts at the top of the hierarchy, but they say the people with the lived experience are really the ones that should be teaching. So like the cult of the expert is a reference to like the dictatorship. They want the dictatorship of the proletariat to overthrow the expert. Wow. Yeah. Pedagogy of the oppressed was the first one for me, but that's crazy. Again.
Every area of the society. The people with AIDS are the experts in this disease.
Nothing about us without us. Yes, nothing about us without us.
In 1990.
It's the same with women's health. It's the same with the health problems of people of color and poor people in this society. Until people turn to their government and say that you're spending our money and you're supposed to be saving our lives and you're not, then we won't get anywhere.
Through the media coverage of their protests, ACT UP was able to reclaim the narrative on HIV and AIDS. Following ACT UP's demonstration in Rockville, the FDA took a hard look at ACT UP's proposal for an accelerated drug approval process, and they decided to speed up its trial timelines for AIDS treatments and therapies. The NIH succeeded in pushing through an ACT UP concept called parallel track, which allowed for the early release of experimental treatments to people who were living with HIV who had no other options. ACT UP's inside-outside tactics were vital to the overall movement's success. But as the organization grew, so did ideological tensions between members who worked on either side. In 1991, some members of ACT UP who favored demonstration and visible protests began to worry that prioritizing government relationships behind the scenes would undermine their momentum.
Oh!
They called for the larger group to vote on placing a sixth.
So this is again going back to the schism between the liberal gay rights activists and the queer activists. There started to be a schism within ACT UP of the people who wanted to be reasonable and work with the government and make small incremental changes. Those are the liberal gay rights activists, and the queer activists who just wanted to protest and cause disturbance because they didn't think things were going fast enough. Do you guys see how subtle that schism is?
And visible protests began to worry that prioritizing government relationships behind the scenes would undermine their momentum. They called for the larger group to vote on placing a 6-month moratorium on meetings with government officials.
Wow.
At the same time, debate within ACT UP over a contentious drug trial had gotten particularly heated. The trial sought to
this is a really interesting point. So Queer Nation split off. I didn't know this. Queer Nation split off from the ACT UP movement, which makes sense. Queer Nation is the organization, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, they published Queers Read This, right? Queers Read This was like the very first piece of like really influential queer propaganda. It came out in 2001. It was handed out at the Pride Parade in 2001, and I'm pretty sure Queer Nation published that. Queer Nation was a queer offshoot of ACT UP because ACT UP wasn't leftist enough for them. Yeah. This is why we need a chart. We need an infographic of like, here are all the different organizations that came out of the ACT UP movement, and here they are on a scale of left to right. That's crazy.
Determine whether giving AZT to pregnant women would prevent HIV transmission from mother to infant. But many women in ACT UP were concerned that taking AZT in this way might make the mother resistant to future treatments.
I was wrong by 10 years.
Pervasive inequalities in the American healthcare system.
What the fuck was I thinking about coming out in 2001? I don't know. So I was off by 10 years. Queers Read This came out in 1990. My bad.
These ideological differences between ACT UP's members were also emotionally charged, heightened by the urgent life or death stakes of their movement. And many members of ACT UP did this work while facing the very real emotional battle of living with the disease themselves. This rift was the final straw in the gradual splintering of that early group. And soon after, many of ACT UP's most fervent early leaders, including Mark Harrington, parted ways with the organization. Now, ACT UP still exists today, with multiple active chapters across the country. And although new HIV drugs can prevent infection, transmission, and reduce viral load to undetectable levels, there is still no cure for AIDS. So ACT UP's mission remains the same, united in anger and committed to direct action to end the AIDS crisis. The policies that ACT UP developed and pushed agencies to adopt have made a huge impact on healthcare in the United States. Even beyond AIDS, many of ACT UP's proposals were codified into law in 1997 and allowed the United States to have a much quicker response to the COVID-19 virus in 2020. For example, Parallel Track paved the way for the United States' first approved...
So that's actually interesting. So the splintering actually started happening earlier than I thought it did, because for some reason I had it in my head that Queers Read This came out in 2001. So the splintering actually started to happen earlier, and I knew the splintering probably started in the 90s. That's got to be something I really look into is what like that's something I'm still a little unclear about in the total, like, because I have to go back and research all this stuff from scratch because I don't trust what anyone else says about this because everyone else has it wrong. But like I'm still unclear about exactly how the splintering off between the liberal gay rights groups and the queer groups, like how that actually played out in the 90s and the 2000s. What's that video, Master Shake?
COVID-19 treatment, remdesivir, and accelerated approval helped to fast-track vaccines and COVID-19 diagnostic tools like PCR and rapid antigen tests. I mean, imagine if we were still waiting for COVID vaccines and treatments today. ACT UP's inside-outside methods are a greatest hits compilation of time-tested resistance ideas, teach-ins from the movement against the Vietnam War, community education and health programs from the Black Panther Party's campaign to address sickle cell anemia, and the congressional hearing on the negative side effects of the birth control pill by the women's health movement in 1970. And all of it really worked. Despite being up against government negligence, media silence, and moral stigma, all the members of ACT UP fought to have their grief and good ideas taken seriously. And it's a really good thing they did because their tenacity and strategic thinking has benefited all of us. What lessons from ACT UP do you think are still relevant today? Let us know in the comments, and thanks for watching Roots of Resistance on PBS.
Roots of Resistance? PBS has a show called Roots of Resistance? Are you shitting me? Has PBS been defunded yet? I know they were talking about defunding NPR and PBS. They have a show about resistance. Oh my God. You know, this is why conservatives are so stupid when they say the left is over, the left is dead. I'm sorry, the left literally owns like all of media. Like you think like and like they're making propaganda on like all the different media channels. Dang. All right, that's a big speech. I don't want to watch that. I'm kind of interested to see what she had to say at the ACLU though. But let's just keep going down. Act up and reclaim pride. What's this? Logo. I don't know what logo is, but. Come on, YouTube, get it together. Get it together. Here we go.
Jay, how's it going?
Hey, Jason.
So I'm Jason
My
Rosenberg.
pride is
I use
political.
he/him pronouns. I'm here to introduce my good friend, comrade.
Comrade! He's calling him a fucking comrade. Are you serious? My pride is political. That's queer activism. Black and pink. It's a political movement. Queer is a political identity. Queer is not about being gay or trans. It's a political identity.
Jason Rosenberg. I use he/him pronouns. I'm here to introduce my good friend, comrade, J.W. Walker, and we're going to talk about the power of protest and the queer movement in general. Jay.
Hey, Jason. So glad to be here with you on Logo to talk about the power of protest. We've known each other for years now through our work with Reclaim Pride and Queer Liberation March. So
Queer
it's
Liberation
gonna be super
March.
fun to talk.
Okay, so for those that don't know, what's the Queer Liberation March? What does it mean
good
to
question.
you? Why did we have it?
The Queer Liberation March is a movement by a lot of queer activists, LGBTQTSIA activists in New York City to get Pride back to its roots. Those of us who helped organize it, I think
all
we
queer
looked
activism.
at what had become of Pride on Pride Sunday, and we saw something.
So
that was
what
incredibly
we're seeing here, I told you that today's queer activists evolved out of the ACT UP movement. What you're seeing here is literally one of the founding members or one of the original participants in the ACT UP movement talking about organizing queer activism today. It could not be more direct. It could not be more obvious. ACT UP was part of the foundation of queer activism as we know it today. Look at the signs. We march against police oppression. This is at a queer liberation march. And they're saying we march against police oppression because, oh my gosh. There we go. Now I can talk again. We march against police oppression because this is an anti-capitalist movement. Police oppression is about capitalism. They believe the police are the managers of capitalism.
SIA activists in New York City to get Pride back to its roots. Those of us who helped organize it, I think that we looked at what had become of Pride on Pride Sunday, and we saw something that was incredibly corporate. We saw something that was way over policed, and we felt that it was time to get back to the garden, to go back to the original Christopher Street.
For Queer Liberation March for Black lives and against police brutality. You cannot make the argument that being queer is about being gay or trans when literally the Queer Liberation March is for Black lives and against police brutality. This is an anti-capitalist march. Yeah, it said Stonewall was a rebellion. Yup.
We felt that it was time to get back to the garden, to go back to the original Christopher Street Liberation Day March, which happened in 1970.
So I want to get back to you and what were your first plantings of protests?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a movement household, in a civil rights movement household. So the idea of protest has always been something that has been in me. And the first time that I was really activated was in the late 90s, in the fall of 1998. When Matthew Shepard was murdered. Then I worked in the AIDS world for about 10 years for Gay Men's Health Crisis. And then the Pulse nightclub shooting happened and became one of the founding members of Gays Against Guns. And I kind of have been in the activist space since then. What about you, Jason?
I feel like I was always involved like since high school. With my plantings were like with Amnesty International. I even interned with them, and from there, ACT UP New York kind of radicalized me with queer people, whether it's part of our healthcare, housing, any of the issues that are so broken. We have these mutual aid and protection networks that keep us safe, that keep us alive. And I think that has always been a part of queer history and part of protest.
Yeah, I agree. It exists because we had to create that sense of community. Generally speaking, queer people don't have their parents to identify. They don't have their family members to teach them, to bring them into the community. So within that realm of finding community, inevitably some voices get buried or don't get the attention that they really should have. From your perspective, Jason, who do you think that kind of gets lost in the shuffle?
Yeah, one of the unsung heroes that I think really changed the game of how we elevate and center Black trans lives and Black trans liberations and Black trans stories is Monica Roberts. And she really reclaimed the story of Black trans lives with her website, Transgrio. And through that, we are finally uplifting Miss Major, who is a longtime activist, whether it was being at the Stonewall in 1969 or her continued work with people living with HIV and her continued commitment to fight for the most marginalized and to always be a voice of leadership.
What's really inspiring me right now is the prison abolition movement, the defund movement, the reapportioning of funding away from police and towards social services. Like in the last 3 months, I've seen the words restorative justice in print more than I have in the last 4 years. When I look at activism, when I look at the work that we do, I always think that the smartest way to move forward is to always try to focus on the needs of the least among us. If you focus on the least among us, then you will uplift everyone. So there's protests, there's activism, and then there's change. And the two don't come hand in hand. How do you judge the success of an individual protest or a protest campaign?
It's definitely really hard to judge success. We have to think of it as an ever-growing, ever-evolving movement. And even like with ACT UP, for instance, we're now in the 33rd year in the 4th decade of the epidemic. We did change a lot, but we're still even fighting the same grievances that we had in 1987. We're fighting pharmaceutical greed. We're fighting housing justice. We're fighting incarceral justice. We're fighting so many things.
This is all socialism.
Still exist. We need that continued rage, that continued energy. And I think if anything, this past summer, a lot of these folks that were new to organizing or re-energized for this new wave of protest had that energy. So for all the youth or anyone who is new to protests or organizing, what are some tips that you could give to them as far as etiquette, as far as being an ally? What are some
good ally, solidarity, comrade?
Yeah, I'd say that the first thing is when you come to a protest, if there's a group that's holding a protest on a specific issue, if that issue is not your personal issue, if you are not the person who is under threat by this issue, listen. The thing to remember is that when organizers are at a protest, when organizers are putting on a protest, they're working.
Yeah, this is labor, that they are taking the time out of their lives and sometimes out of their full-time work to be there.
They have
to
jobs?
Speak about their experience.
Wow.
They don't need to be doing that, but we need to give them thanks and gratitude by
I
funding
didn't think they had jobs.
Whether it's supporting bail funds, whether it's funding organizers, there's always a role for everyone.
Yeah, there are many roads.
Yeah,
there are many
labor.
roads to the goals of activism, and they don't necessarily all have to be out in these streets. What do you see as the positives that have come out of this year, Jason?
We have found through
only conservatives
organizing,
have jobs.
through
Exactly.
a pandemic, through living in a fucking fascist state, that we have found coalition, that we found community, even new community. We have new organizations that are popping up, whether it's Warriors in the Garden or our weekly Stonewall protests. So we're finding new ways to engage with each other, to coalition build, that is really just based on community.
For me, it's the youth. It's these young, particularly youths of color that have come out in this moment of reckoning. I love that they have captured the leaderless movement.
A leaderless
historically
movement.
In this country, leaders of those movements get killed.
You guys hear that? This is a leaderless movement.
In this moment of reckoning, I love that they have captured the leaderless movement. Historically in this country, leaders of those movements get killed or get incarcerated. And they've gotten smart, these kids, they understand that, and they are working around those realities in a really powerful way. So that's really exciting me about this time.
Ooh, that sounds really good, average person.
Jason, this has been a great conversation. Thank you.
This has
been really enjoyable. I've also enjoyed
great
reading the
and
spines
amazing and bold and beautiful, and you're just amazing, Jason. Okay, let's see what's next. I kind of want to watch this ACLU thing. It's 35 minutes long, though. I just want to see what the ACLU had to say about it. Let's see. What else do they have that might be interesting? We've already watched the documentary. This is them presenting at the DSA. I definitely want to watch this at some point. I just don't want to watch it right now. Come on, give me some more ACT UP videos. Let's see. GLAAD. St. Francis College. Jewish Currents. No kidding. No kidding. An hour and 15-minute conversation on Jewish Currents about the ACT UP movement. You don't say. Why on earth would a Jewish website be promoting a militant queer activism movement? I am shook at this revelation. How could this possibly happen? Democracy Now. Hunter College. Let's go back and watch the ACLU thing. That's about 35 minutes long. I think that'll be a good one. So is this a podcast? Okay, so we see her talking in it. Okay. Maybe not. Maybe we do that, maybe we don't. Hang on. Let me scroll a little bit more. I haven't seen him actually. Let's watch this. One of the founding members of ACT UP speaking at St. Francis College. I am not familiar with him. I'm familiar with that other one.
I think one of the most important lessons, it's great you're studying social movements or at least have an interest in them, is the role of emotion here. There was tremendous anger, and I think that comes right through the screen, because people were dying and there was a lot of evidence that the city, the state, the federal government were not responding, that big pharma was making a lot of money but wasn't producing any drugs, that everything was stacked against people who happened to get this disease. That anger rose in the early years. In the early years, there wasn't a whole lot to do except take people to a hospital or a doctor and die. Quickly, nonprofit social service agencies were set up that had support groups, delivered all kinds of services, but they were not willing to confront the political establishment.
You start getting all... Chris says, I made the mistake of looking at a bunch of queer stuff on the wrong YouTube account and now my algorithm's all fucked up. Oh, Chris, if you see anything fun, let us know, because one of the most fun rabbit holes you can go down on YouTube, I think, is the queer algorithm, because you get served all sorts of crazy stuff.
About 5-6 years into the epidemic, there was enough anger that ACT UP formed and took off. And as you can see, politicians and big institutions were confronted at every step. And one of the pieces you see a lot of on the screen is street protest. But there was much more to ACT UP. Sometimes you'll see our weekly meetings, but a tremendous amount of intellectual work, writing reports, and basically becoming experts, because if we were going to beat the people in power at their own game, we had to know everything. So let me open it up.
I just want to really make sure people understand what we're watching right now. Pause. YouTube. Pause. This is a founding member of the ACT UP movement giving a lecture at a college, teaching college students about how to organize an activist movement, a militant activist movement. And you can see, just based on the basic search results that I got from putting ACT UP movement in the search on YouTube, we see college speech after college speech after college speech after college speech of members of the ACT UP movement running around to all sorts of different colleges. Yeah, and this is a Catholic college too, Catholics. See, I can't say the Groypers anymore because we broke up. I'm no longer with the Groypers. We broke up. So whatever, they can figure this out on their own. But you see all these activists running around being guest speakers and guest lecturers at colleges, brought in by their lefty college professor friends. This is how activists are trained. This is how they get their ideas. So many people have been coming into my feed lately, and they're just like, Karlyn, I just don't understand why people believe this stuff. They believe it because they were told it in school. They were told it in college. They were told it in high school. They were told it in middle school. They were told it in elementary school. Literally, the people graduating from high school and college today have been told this information at every single grade level in school since they were 5 years old. And yes, in red states too, and yes, in red cities too, because it doesn't matter if you live in a red state, because the majority of teachers in public schools are trained by the far left activists. So this is how they do this. And it's like, people look at stuff like this. Like, I show speeches like this on my channel all the time, and people are like, oh yeah, how many views does it have? And then we look at the views, and the view count usually isn't very high. And then people are like, oh, this didn't have an impact. Like, you retards, these people are running around lecturing to college class after college class after college class over and over and over and over and over again. Do you think that that doesn't add up in numbers? Do you think that the only way to measure success in the world is the number of views you get on YouTube? Because I can tell you, as someone who gets shit on for the amount of views I get on YouTube, I am much more successful getting views on other platforms than I am on YouTube. So for every 1,000 views I might get on YouTube, I get 10,000 views over on Substack, or sometimes even more than that. And so it's kind of like, you can't judge the effectiveness of something based on YouTube views, because oftentimes what the left is doing is they're going into the real world and they're meeting people in the real world where they are. And that's much more effective. And then they might put video of the talk on YouTube after that, but it's not the point of this. This talk was not given to go on YouTube. This talk was given to a group of college students in a room. Probably no more than a couple dozen students, by the way, were in that room, because usually class sizes like this are pretty small, and that's how they reached them. So you've got to stop, like, this whole idea that we need to be reaching thousands or tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people at every single instance. It's just wrong. And the left doesn't buy into it at all. They know going out and meeting people in person and just doing it over and over and over and over and over again very consistently, that's actually the way you build an activism movement, not some sort of social media exercise where you're just tweeting all the time.
There was the big scandal with the CEO, Martin Shkreli, I think his name was, raising the price of, I think it was an HIV drug by 5,000%. What was your reaction to that? Like, I know it's more modern rather than, this ACT UP obviously started in 1987, but what was your reaction to that? The friends that you still have that are with you today, that were in the movement, what was their reaction to it?
That's a great question, because one of the ways that ACT UP evolved in the early months and year or two, what our chants often were drugs into bodies. And later, that evolved into healthcare access. Healthcare access, meaning we were more or less pushing single payer way back when nobody would even think about that.
Universal healthcare.
So to look at Shkreli, I'm never sure how to say his name, what I think about is not so much what he's doing, but the failure of the government to do serious structural healthcare reform and to regulate drug prices. So if there was strong organizing, people could have had fun at that hearing in Washington where he testified. So all the heat's on Shkreli, but they don't, nobody's saying what's the real issue behind this.
Are you guys still active in legislation to this day? Do you go up to Washington if there's an issue or a discrepancy?
The group ACT UP continues. Some of the conditions, though, in those days have changed. There is what some people informally call drug cocktail. So AIDS is now viewed as a chronic condition rather than a fatal disease. And some of the shift, which we fought for back then, was more money and more resources dedicated to HIV. Is there more to do? Absolutely. I mean, I don't know how many of you deal with healthcare issues on a daily basis, but it is a continuing struggle, a political struggle that requires organizing. And one of the lessons from...
I just want to say, I got the oddest picture in my head when Average Person tweeted this. He's saying to upgrade, thank you for glad to see you're willing to learn. Thank you, but also sorry for shoving the red suppository. Listen, like sometimes I feel like for people who've been around my channel for a while, you'll appreciate this more than the newbies. Sometimes I feel like when new people come to the channel, we basically we do this all virtually and figuratively, but it is almost like we're holding them down and saying, shut the fuck up and listen to what's going on, and you're gonna learn shit that you never heard anywhere else. And we are literally like trying to shove it into them. Like we almost have to like tackle people when they come on the channel and like duct tape them to a chair and put something over their mouth so they stop talking in the chat and they start listening. Because it's like there's so many new people that come onto the channel that like they have ideas about what the left says and does because they've been lied to by conservative influencers. And literally sometimes it's like it feels like you have to kind of tackle someone and be like, shut the fuck up. It's like we are clockwork oranging people. Yeah, that's exactly it. Someone new comes onto the channel and we say, okay, put the fucking straitjacket on, sit down in the chair. We're putting the things on your eyes and your job is just to sit back and listen. And you're not going anywhere until you see. And you can scream and cry and complain all you want, but you came here to learn this information, and we will make sure you learn this information. But sometimes it's not always the most pleasant experience for you at the beginning because we're helping you through your cognitive dissonance. We are helping you to overcome the amount of layers of bullshit that conservative media has put in your brain. It's not your fault, but the cure isn't always that easy. And sometimes it involves a lot of pain for you because we have to make you look at something you don't want to look at.
ACT UP and AIDS as a deadly epidemic is that even in the face of, we would hear the names of our members who died every week announced at the beginning of the meeting. Even in the face of that, you've got to fight back.
So with every kind of protest movement or movement at all, you see sometimes it can get chaotic, right? And I think throughout the film, like there were some points where you can say, wow, it's crazy, like got a little violent here and there. But I guess what I'm trying to ask you is, did that like influence people to not join ACT UP? Or, I mean, did that influence people to become part of this movement? Like, how did you guys keep increasing the numbers of people to continue to be active within the movement itself?
Well, ACT UP was more militant than radical. I mean, it was a radical idea to confront
ACT UP was militant. Oh, you don't say.
Healthcare reform and the need for treatment and all. But the militants both brought us members, and sometimes people were scared or turned off at that approach. But part of what happened is that the initial numbers in the room, the room was barely filled when I joined ACT UP. And we got so many people coming just to the main meeting, let alone the committee meetings, that we moved to Cooper Union's Great Hall, which holds 900 people. So
900 people they had at their organizing
social
meetings. That's
movements,
crazy.
ACT UP is kind of a standout because it was not a mass movement, but we had chapters all over the country and some internationally that managed to do quite a lot with, I don't want to say small numbers of people, but in the big scheme of things, like compared to, I worked in anti-war movements, which involved, gigantic demonstrations. The biggest demo that ACT UP was involved in New York was about 7,000 people, and that was with a reproductive rights movement group. It was co-organized. So it helped and hurt. And Larry Kramer, I think, said it well on screen, because after the demonstration at St. Patrick's Cathedral, every single editorial page slammed us. I remember being at the press conference the next day. It was scary for us to create that much of a backlash, but then you start to think about it and realize, wow, suddenly we have power to galvanize people and get them to listen to what we're saying. But the brain part, it's great to go on the street and, you can see what elaborate training there was for civil disobedience and direct action. The breaking of the glass, that was fairly unusual. In some situations, property damage can end up drawing all the media attention and taking it away from whatever point you're trying to make.
And when you say the media attention can also bring a negative light to the group, because depending on how the media portrays it.
In the early days of the epidemic, you can actually go back and see what the coverage was even before AIDS had that name. It was this rare gay cancer. That's when I first heard about it. But compared to the coverage of, say, Legionnaire's disease, if anybody remembers that, or toxic shock syndrome, there was very little coverage. So we were also in a battle with the media. And some of this stuff was obviously staged. It was performative to get attention. And sometimes the media, would come along, and sometimes they wouldn't. But it wasn't just to get people arrested. It was to put our bodies on the line, putting our message across. The pressure and the organizing is what makes the difference. Sometimes you get progress from who gets elected to office, but I have an unusual viewpoint about politicians, which is I think they follow, they don't lead. They follow who has written them checks, but if you're out on the street, actually good moment for a prop, ACT UP had amazing visuals, and this, which you could just stick inside your jacket if you were at a rally, say in New Hampshire. Whether anybody was yelling or whether they cut the microphones off didn't matter, because just one turn of a photographer's lens and suddenly the message is there.
When I was at Boston Pride, I didn't post pictures of this, but at Boston Pride, someone or some organization brought a whole bunch of big poster boards and a whole bunch of markers, and they basically took over kind of this little bench at a bus stop where people would normally wait for the bus, but this was right outside where Boston Pride was organizing, and they were getting the parade together and all that. And so you could actually go into this little bus stop and just take one of these poster boards and take some markers and make whatever sign you wanted. And so it was in case you didn't bring a sign to the protest, they created a way for you to make a sign at the protest. It's just little things like this. The left thinks about these things. They think about the visual that you're holding up. The right does not think about this stuff at all in any way.
That's what it'll take to get single payer. Good question. I was sort of drawing a blank. I'm sure there were supporters who were people of faith, but I don't know how much formal alliances we had with faith communities. Going back to that earlier question, there were certainly some fault lines that opened up because the kind of establishment, gay, it's a little odd to talk about the gay realm in those days as having an establishment, but there were a lot of people where do you get off doing all this militant stuff? And so it took a lot to get our footing. And some of these protests, the one at the Food and Drug Administration, that one in particular put ACT UP on a national map.
9 years ago, this video was made, 2016.
Quite an event. But there were millions.
See, look what I said. This has 360 views and it was made 9 years ago. So many people on the internet would go, I don't even know why we're watching this. No one's seen this. It has no views. And it's like, we're listening to one of the leaders of one of the most influential protest movements of all time, lecture on a college campus. This actually matters.
The people for whom life went on and they heard nothing of this. It was like living in a small war zone.
Okay. Do you think the opposition to the movement and the fact that, issue of HIV and AIDS was being swept under the rug a lot of times was because of the fact that the majority, sufferers of the diseases happen to be homosexual?
There was a battle not only for treatment, but against stigma and prejudice, absolutely. So there were fascinating ways. I mean, you can hear it actually, like this documentary is suffused, we didn't use that word back then, with intersectionality, because there were, we had to both, or our commitment was to fight for sexual civil liberties in the midst of a deadly epidemic, because there were people who wanted, William F. Buckley advocated tattoos. There were people who were talking about quarantine.
They wanted to tattoo people who had AIDS, really?
It seemed like a single issue, but actually a gigantic bundle of issues. And in that room on Monday nights, there was an intricate agenda. There was tight facilitation. And often as something came to what we called the floor, that was the people who were at the Monday meetings, like the floor, the floor of Congress or something.
As a reminder, this is not about AIDS activism. This is about queer activism. So this group still exists today. This group is still active today. This group was the precursor for militant queer activism today.
And it didn't seem like it had a really close connection
so no, it
to
was not
AIDS.
killed
People
off.
would yell out, what has this got to do with AIDS? And you had to justify that connection. So we're always trying to keep our focus, even as AIDS was many sub-issues.
I just want to make a comment. The question the young man just asked, that was exactly the way Reagan felt. He was totally indifferent. He thought that they got what they deserved.
Right.
And so the thing was said from the top. He was totally indifferent to the epidemic that was going on.
Well, it was 6 years, I believe, before President Reagan uttered the word AIDS. And you can see what we did with him as a visual, turning him into this like Frankenstein figure. But in those years, between 1981 or so, 1987, when ACT UP formed, the groups who were doing great stuff, AIDS Project Los Angeles, Gay Men's Health Crisis, People with AIDS Coalition, what grew into hundreds of social service advocacy groups around the country. Money was hard to get, either foundation grants, individual donations, contracts. So they were not going to challenge the government, which is where we came in, where ACT UP came in, to make noise about what the allocation of resources was. And some of these fights, the last one was the last, this film is arranged chronologically, but the symptoms of the underlying conditions that AIDS constitutes was presenting itself much differently in women. And it involved this huge battle to get the definition reworked. And it probably couldn't have been done by people who worked in hospitals or worked in various kinds of agencies. It was going to happen when somebody just took it up as a cause. Brain power again, huge amount of brain power.
Do you think that we became aware of the AIDS when Rock Hudson had it?
There were different moments when awareness of AIDS spiked. There was a group called Visual AIDS that sprung up in the visual art world, and they created something that is almost, it doesn't mean anything by itself. It was a red ribbon. And they got the red ribbon on the Academy Awards one year, early when the red ribbon was first created. And that reached an audience that was just gigantic. So it was a real building process from hardly anybody knowing what was going on. And I should note that all this work you saw took place barely, I mean, typewriters were still around. Computers had arrived, but the internet had not arrived. So we were live. And when it came to getting information out, like, you didn't do a protest without a fact sheet. It would just be absolutely a no-no, because the idea was to convey information and persuade people. Many of those leaflets were weed pasted all over Manhattan and other parts of New York. It's really hard to do that now. And of course, it's sort of strange to weed paste because we have the internet and all. But I think about that a lot, because these days, a lot of political activity has moved to the internet, where you're clicking a mouse. And there are some advantages to that. But when you have people in a room together who can see each other and hear the tonation and the tones of voice and all, you can have a real meeting of the minds, which is why that organizing wave that you saw was so powerful. One other thing I should mention is that money. There was no payroll. And what that meant is that all the people you see doing all these things, some of them jaw-dropping, were doing it because they wanted to do it. Now, we had money around, like money started to arrive when people realized, wow, ACT UP is an important thing, we should support it. Like for bail, if people they went to North Carolina and, I don't know, barricaded themselves in an office, a drug company executive office, and the bail was tens of thousands of dollars. So we would have that around, but it was never for individual compensation. It was for the expenses of doing the political work.
I really want to make sure people understand this and people hear this, because if the ACT UP movement were happening today, the conservative right would be screaming, they're paid protesters. They're all paid to be there. They're only doing this because they get paid. Conservatives would be placing fake ads on Craigslist saying, we're going to pay you $500 an hour to go protest, which are never real. What the protest leader is telling us very clearly is people were not paid to do this. They did this because they wanted to do this. They did this because this was part of their community. This was part of their social circle. This was part of their identity. This was a cause they believed in. We had money, but money was dedicated to legal things and helping people get bailed out of jail or hiring lawyers or stuff like that. We did not pay individuals to protest. And by the way, conservatives, the exact same thing is true today. You might be able to find onesie or twosie people that got paid cab fare or dinner to go to a protest, but the vast majority of leftist protesters in the United States today, we're talking like 99%, are not paid to protest. This is one of those stupid lies that conservatives tell, that it's like you are completely cutting your legs out from under you by lying at the very beginning about why these people are doing what they're doing. They're not out there because they got paid. They're out there because they genuinely believe this. Listen.
And what that meant is that all the people you see doing all these things,
I have to go back a little more.
Who can see each other and hear the tonation and the tones of voice and all, you can have a real meeting of the minds, which is why that organizing wave that you saw was so powerful. One other thing I should mention is that money. There was no payroll. And what that meant is that all the people you see doing all these things, some of them jaw-dropping,
this is unironically true. This is unironically true. And I know this for an absolute fact. It just shows the only way for conservatives to go out and protest is they themselves got paid to do it. I know this for an absolute fact. Listen, people may not know this about me if you're new to my content. I did rallies every single week for the Walkaway campaign for 6 months during the 2020 election. The Walkaway campaign literally flew me around the country to go and to speak at rallies. And guess what? Every time I did a rally for them, I got paid. Every single time. I got my plane airfare paid. Obviously, I got my hotel paid for, but I also got $250 per event. Now, that's not a whole lot of money. Basically, it was to cover lifts to the hotels. It was to cover food while I was at the protest. I wasn't getting rich off of those things, but I promise you, if any conservative group got a hold of like a leftist group that paid someone $250 to go and speak at an event, they would be screaming about it from the rooftops. They're paid, they're paid, they're paid. Guess what? The only reason people spoke at walkaway rallies in 2020 when I was involved is because they got paid to. Every single person speaking at a walkaway rally got paid to be there. Every single one. And I'll tell you what too, mostly conservatives did not even show up to those rallies. Mostly no one showed up. So every single time conservatives are complaining about paid protesters, that is actually what their organizations are doing. It is not what the left is doing.
And what that meant is that all the people you see doing all these things, some of them jaw-dropping, were doing it because they wanted to do it. Now, we had money around, like money started to arrive when people realized, wow, ACT UP is an important thing, we should support it. Like for bail, if people went to North Carolina and, I don't know, barricaded themselves in an office, a drug company executive office, and the bail was tens of thousands of dollars. So we would have that around, but it was never for individual compensation. It was for the expenses of doing the political work. And it's that's an interesting thing to think about because our political activity was a labor of love. And what bound us together was the fun. You know, whereas if you're working in an office or an organization, it's the paycheck. So often when you've got a totally volunteer effort like that, people get interested and they're having fun. There's no limit to what they'll do. I mean, I've been around a lot of organizing and it's exciting because the more that I've learned, usually organically, the more I wanna do it and I wanna see change. I don't think things change very quickly or at all by themselves. You've often got to really figure out a way, take your best shot. Occupy was also
Occupy Wall Street.
The twin emotions of anger and fun down at Zuccotti. Different kind of anger because it wasn't people dying every day, but it was about future prospects stolen, houses foreclosed, a world where a small number were getting richer and richer and everybody else sensing there's something really wrong here. The fun was absolutely there. Different structures though. ACT UP was open as Occupy was. Anybody could walk in and participate, but ACT UP had a weekly meeting. So we kind of centralized our decision-making with that weekly meeting. If you missed the meeting, you were really, sort of out of it. Occupy had big meetings, but it wasn't all one thing. Like if somebody wanted to set up another working group, they'd set up another working group. It avoided disagreements, but it also meant that we weren't all pulling together. Koch, I think, Ed Koch, mayor, was somewhat contrite years later and acknowledged the role that we played giving him hell. Reagan, I'm not so sure. Yeah. But being willing to go after those people, ACT UP was gained a lot from having people around who were part of the 1970s gay, lesbian movement, but also Mike Spiegel, who's on screen, was involved in Students for Democratic Society. There were several people from the Black Panthers, and one of our tactics, it's not something we invented at all, it was really more 70s gay organizing, zaps. Seems like there's going to be a simple, peaceful community meeting or town meeting or something, a politician's going to come, and all of a sudden there are a lot of people who pull out signs and start chanting. So the surprise element kept people off balance. You can't use these tactics all the time. And it wasn't just the tactics we were using, it's that we had a thought out set of demands and why we were doing it.
I want to point this out too. So he just said we had a thought out set of demands. He's talked in this presentation about how anytime they had a protest, they had a fact sheet that they handed out. One of the common lies that conservative bullshit artists tell is what they do is they go to a leftist protest and they ask a whole bunch of people, why are you here? Why are you here? Why are you here? Why are you here? Most of the people who go to your average leftist protest will know exactly why they're there. But what conservatives do is they find the video of like the one person that they talk to that has no idea what's going on. And so they're like, oh, I don't know. I'm just here because I'm here and because it seems like a fun thing to do. And then they take the video of that person and they put it online and they say, look, guys, the left doesn't even know why they're protesting. I mean, look at this one video of this one person who doesn't know why they're at a protest. No one here knows why they're at the protest. Of course, that's bullshit. Most of the people absolutely do know why. I've got a fly flying around. Most of the people actually do know why they're there. And commonly at protests, you will have big signs saying, here are the list of our demands. Having a list of demands is one of the primary, it's one of their organizing 101 strategies. I've been in presentations with them where they talked about organizing protests and events, and having a list of demands is always very high on the checklist. So don't ever believe, this is again why I really encourage people. I know people like their conservative clickbait. I know they like their libs of TikTok. I know they're like, Steven Crowder's bullshit. I know they like all that stuff. But if you watch too much conservative clickbait, you will become monumentally confused about what's actually going on, because none of that stuff is real and it doesn't actually reflect the majority of what the left is doing.
What's the status of AIDS today? Is the epidemic over?
It is not over. It has changed, as I said, to a chronic manageable condition. There are some epidemics, populations that are affected differently. Young men of color are heavily impacted by the epidemic still. So,
well, do conservatives talk to the people who know why they're there protesting? Why would they show you the video of that? Why would it benefit conservative clickbait artists to show you video of socialists and communists talking about why they're protesting? I show video all the time of socialists and communists talking about why they're protesting. It's not as though this video doesn't exist. Guess what? No one cares about the actual evidence. This stuff doesn't go viral on the internet. What goes viral is, look at this libtard being dumb, guys. We're dunking on the libs today. So they do the dunking on the libs content, and then when they like in the off chance that they actually get someone that's talking about what they're doing, it very rarely goes viral because people just don't care. All they care about is the dunking on the libs. So do they show it is the actual question. Well, yeah, it should go viral, but it doesn't. Unless, with rare exceptions, sometimes it does, but most of the time it doesn't.
So we see the number of cases. I'm not real current on the epidemiology, but we see the number of cases, new infections going down, but among some demographics, that's not true. And what would change that? More attention to prevention. And, there's also this drug PrEP, which is a drug that's used to treat HIV, but is used so that you can't be infected. And I have mixed feelings about it because I lived through an era as a gay man where we all thought, well, if you get syphilis or something else, you just go and get a shot. And then HIV comes around and there is no shot for it. So sometimes nature has different ideas than whether we're invincible.
Prep.
You mentioned the GMHC. How closely did ACT UP work with GMHC, or if at all?
We collaborated sometimes, but other times we were quite at each other's throats.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, because they were somewhat on the establishment side, and of course they did have a payroll, so they couldn't take chances like we took. That's not to say though that we appreciated their, I'll put it in I appreciated their work, and I'm certain that many of the people who worked for AIDS service organizations, they would often leak us information or leak us what their wish list was because they couldn't move it themselves. We were the ones who were in a position to move it. So it's like good cop, bad cop stuff that often happened, which goes back to that initial question, was the militants bringing you support or was it sending it away? Both.
Okay, so we're going to have to end in a minute, but maybe you could just conclude and say something that I know when students speak about the LGBTQ movement, one of the issues that they think it's all about gay marriage. And can you talk about how the history of gay protest kind of moved from being about sexual liberation to protesting AIDS to being almost solely focused on gay marriage, at least in the
Oh, I can't wait to hear this explanation.
That's true. That for at least a decade, one way to go and look back at gay history is 1969, the New York Police Department, their Vice Squad, made a routine raid on a bar in Greenwich Village called the Stonewall. And they got a big surprise, which is the patrons and the people on the street hanging out while the paddy wagons were being loaded. We're not happy about this raid. And there was a riot, some say a rebellion, and it went on for several days. Before the first night was out, and I see a lot of nodding heads, so I think some of you know this history. And it's kind of, not the beginnings of sexual minority organizing, but it was a real watershed. The reason why it was a watershed, very relevant to what you're studying, right away, people who were skilled organizers got out leaflets calling people to meetings. If that hadn't been done, it would have just been an odd, strange thing, a riot that went on for several days. But it spawned a whole bunch of groups, Gay Liberation Front, later Gay Activist
Gay
Alliance.
Liberation Front.
And the movement in those days was concerned about criminalization, people being busted for being with somebody of the same, for having sex. We were criminalized in those days. And tremendous job discrimination and stigma. And then early in the 80s is when HIV arrived. So it was a very tumultuous period when a community started to come much more above ground and have to fight a deadly disease. And then some of those early aspirations and goals got sidetracked for a marriage. And now I think the movement is sort of shifting gears. What do we stand for? I hope it's larger visions of social justice and not just equality.
Oh, yeah?
Equality is fine, but its liberation is a bigger, more interesting thing.
Like anti-capitalism?
Thank you so much, Bill.
Wow.
Did I use up all the time?
So you can tweet me or
Here's one of the bloody hands.
Yeah, this is
these are hard
iconic.
to see, but you saw them in the film. And this is something that would have been wheat pasted. It's got a lot of copy, but the big message, like the people who did ACT UP's graphics were very, very good at catching your eye and then making you read, the small stuff. We also had some things that were a special size. This is the size of a subway car ad, and they got snuck in there as if they were real ads. So they were like our ACT UP propaganda.
I mean, just like think about that. This is how the left thinks. They're like, let's make something the size of a subway ad so that when you're on the subway, you can take in a bunch of these things and put them over the ads on the subway so that everyone that rides the subway sees them and thinks it's a real ad. This is how the left thinks.
I thought I brought 2 of these. The best thing, this is when Ed Koch was running for mayor, and this would have been, we pasted all over the place. The best thing Koch will probably do for people with AIDS, lose the election. I think you saw, I mean, again, you know, this thing, to this day, if you want to go to a political meeting and you got something about this size that just folds up real easy, very, very bold type and all, you're in. Oh, and here's one of the this one I don't think ever got worn, which is
they
why it's
still
in such
sell
good
these
shape.
t-shirts to this day.
And by itself, I mean, what does that mean, ACT UP? You know, it's like when you accuse a kid of acting up, you know, but AIDS Coalition Unleashed Power. And then the Keith Haring, who died of AIDS and was very much a member of ACT UP, he designed what was our best-selling t-shirt.
And I remember Keith Haring being like Keith Haring was actually one of the first artists I ever knew about. Do you want to know why? Because I remember Keith Haring being lifted up on Nickelodeon when I was a kid, when I was still watching Nickelodeon, when Nickelodeon was still good and they had like Ren and Stimpy and Doug and stuff like that. But I distinctly remember learning about Keith Haring, this specific artist, on Nickelodeon in probably the 90s, the early 90s.
And there were ways in which what we think of as like downtown Manhattan, meaning a world of, it's kind of like, it's not a geographic place, but a different kind of cultural space. ACT UP was very much at the center of it. It was actually possible to be doing politics and popular at the same time. It wasn't like a nerdy pursuit at all back then.
Oh, You Can't Do That on Television was so good. Best Nickelodeon show ever. You Can't Do That on Television. That is a classic. I wonder if there are episodes are there episodes of that online? I would do an entire episode just watching old back episodes of You Can't Do That on Television. I would do an entire episode just watching old episodes of Sally Jesse. I would do an entire episode watching, I don't know. Do you know what another great Nickelodeon show was? Hey Dude. That was also a great Nickelodeon show. Anyway. All right. Well, I think that'll wrap it up for today. We did watch a whole bunch of great videos on ACT UP. Of course, there's still many more videos to watch and many more I want to see. But I hope people enjoyed that little kind of, like, I thought that was actually really informative for me to see how the mainstream media covered the ACT UP movement. And this is something, again, that we've researched into. This is something I'm researching for a book that I'm writing about, specifically the evolution of queer Marxism and stuff like that. And so I hope people enjoyed it and found it informative. Again, if you would like to learn more about the left and get access to more of my work, head over to my Substack. That is Karlyn, Karlyn. Oh, fuck, Salute Your Shorts. That was also a great show. That was an awesome show. Pete and Pete, also an awesome show. Even though Pete and Pete are now both leftists. Whatever. Anyway, if you want to access more of my work on the far left, please head over to my Substack. That is Karlyn, Karlyn.substack.com. If you feel like supporting the work I'm doing, because I'm 100% funded to do this by people like you, sign up for $8 a month, $80 a year. Also, make sure you are signed up for tomorrow's class, because we are doing an introduction to the far left, an anti-communist introduction, of course. This is going to be great for newer people. This is totally free. I'm recording this class live. I'm going to be taking your questions. It will be available on demand after the fact for new people to be able to access when they find my work for the first time. And they're like, Karlyn, what is all this stuff? I need an introduction. I'm making an introduction course for you. And it's going to be about an hour and a half long. It's going to be very, very, very intro level. It's going to be very basic, but it's meant for people who are brand new to this, who want that kind of overview introduction before we get them to the 4-hour How to Speak Socialist Masterclass. All right. So you can sign up for that. That is going to be tomorrow at 8 p.m. And then also remember, I am doing a space with Amalek in about an hour and a half. This is a different subject. We're going to be talking about how Amalek hates Jesus and about how he believes that Christianity is a psyop and how he became a racist and all of these things. I'm actually interested in his story. I'm interested in what his journey is. I'm interested in what his perspectives are. I think he's really smart, and I think you guys are really going to like the space. We're going to do that over on Twitter in about an hour and a half around 9 p.m. Eastern time. So come and hang out for that and ask questions if you have them. And is that it? I think that's it. I think that is it. So I will be back at 5 p.m. tomorrow if you don't come to the Twitter space tonight, and we'll do a maze videos tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be episode 420. So what we're going to do is watch sex ed videos for middle schoolers. I think it's a great idea. I don't think it's going to be at all traumatic. And that's what we're going to do tomorrow at 5 p.m. So if you've never seen a maze videos, you know, if you smoke weed, tomorrow's going to be a good day to smoke weed and come watch a maze videos with us. I promise you, it's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. That's going to be tomorrow at 5 p.m. Of course, I'm not encouraging anyone to do drugs or anything like that. I would never do that. Obviously, I've never been high on the internet before. That has absolutely never happened. Are you going to get Lauren Southern's new book? Nope, I'm not. I don't care. A great question, Nuru2. Thank you for the super chat, but I'm going to be honest. I don't give a I don't care. I don't care who Lauren Southern has slept with. I don't care what illegal things Lauren Southern has done. I mean, listen, I have no beef with Lauren Southern. I really don't. I don't have anything against her. I'm kind of neutral when it comes to her, but I have more important things to do than read a tell-all book. I just do. I don't care. I don't care. Anyway, guys, I will see you tomorrow and or at the Twitter space tonight. Let's see. There's the outro video. All right, guys, take care. Have fun. We'll see you.
How are you feeling? How long have you been here? 3 months, May 17th. And what brought you? That's difficult to answer. my thinking, and consequently my action.
What is it you're trying to do with your life?
Play the piano for people.
I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.